Let the record reflect, we have reconvened with all members present. As we rise for Pledge of Allegiance, please remain standing after the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing. I'd like to request a moment of silence for three Madisonians we've lost over the past 2 weeks. Ruth Hammond passed away at the age of 98 on February 10th. She moved to Madison at the ripe old age of 26, 72 years ago. Ruth was an active member of the Thursday Morning Club. She was on the board of the Madison Senior Center. She represented the Madison Senior Center on the Senior Advisory Committee. And while on the Mothers Guild at St. Vincent Martyr School, she helped establish the library. And then just over this past week, Jerome Holtzman, as most of us knew him as Bud, died. He was a Madison resident for the past 35 years. Bud served our country with distinction in the 3rd Army 94th Infantry Division, World War II. He was part of New Jersey World War II Memorial Commission and served on the Madison Patriotic Celebrations Committee for many years. And he was very proud when he got to serve as a Grand Marshal in the Memorial Day Parade. And as an engineer by trade, he was also very helpful with his creative solutions for the borough over the years. And then just yesterday, Vicki Martell, who many of us have known and also know her husband, Tony, very well, died yesterday after a long illness. Vicki was a 50-year resident of Madison, director of the music ministry at St. Vincent Martyr School, longtime member of the Thursday Morning Club, and of course with her husband Tony, co-founder of T.J. Martell Foundation. And through the foundation, Vicki Martell's legacy will live on every day as we come closer to a cure for cancer, leukemia, and AIDS. So a moment of silence for these three great Madisonians. Thank you. May I have a motion for both the executive minutes of January 25th and February 8th, 2016.
So moved. Second.
And we've already had discussion. Council vote, or roll call vote, please.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Here.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
And a motion for the regular minutes of January 25th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
And a motion for the regular minutes of February 8th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Right. Welcome all. Coming out tonight. Just a couple quick things on our agenda, which will be coming up shortly. We've rearranged the agenda discussions. We'll be starting off with the appropriation of $125,000 for restoration and repair of the James Library building. We will then move on to the Downtown Development Commission 2015 annual report, and then on to the budget discussion. Item 12, which is the invitation for discussion, we'll open that up to the first two items, and any resolutions. We'll hold off on the budget just as we did 2 weeks ago, and our other budget hearings will allow comments immediately after the budget discussion. And on announcements for the Madison Library, invites local residents to Saturday afternoon family programs in March. Saturday, March 5th from 2 to 3:30 will be Star Wars Saturday at the Madison Public Library, featuring Vader's first 501st Legion. I have no idea what that's about, but I'm sure the Star Wars fans do know that. Join the dark side. The library will be celebrating all things Star Wars with a visit from the 501st Legion. Star Wars crafts and costume competition will be featured, so don't forget to dress up like your favorite Star Wars characters. And on
Saturday, March 12th, the Great Swamp will present maple sugaring time starting at 1 p.m., including a presentation on the history and science of maple sugaring and the science behind selecting the best tree. And the library will be participating in New Jersey Makers Day on Saturday, March 19th from 1 to 3 p.m. Many exciting activities have been planned. Support for this program is thanks to the support received by the Friends of the Madison Library, and all are invited to the Friends Gala on Saturday, March 19th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the library. And we're going to do a proclamation. So, in case anyone's wondering why the Cat in the Hat is here, Gal Stein, please step forward. So I'm going to do this really works today. I'm going to do our proclamation, and then I have one extra thing to do. And this is for Read Across America Day, March 2nd, 2016. Whereas as citizens of the Borough of Madison stand firmly committed to promoting reading as a catalyst for our students' future and academic progress, their preparation for America's jobs of the future, and their ability to compete in the global economy. And whereas the Borough of Madison has provided significant leadership in the area of community involvement in the education of our youth, grounded in the principle that education investment is the key to communities' well-being and long-term quality of life. And whereas the NEA's Read Across America, a national celebration of Dr. Seuss's 112th birthday on March 2nd, 2016, promotes reading and adult involvement in the education of our community's students. Now, therefore, I, Robert H. Conley, the mayor of the Borough of Madison, on behalf of the governing body, call on the citizens of Madison to assure that every child is in a safe place, reading together with a caring adult on March 2nd, 2016. Further, we enthusiastically endorse the NEA's Read Across America and recommit our community to engage in programs and activities to make America's children the best readers in the world. So that's part one. I'll put that there for a second.
Okay.
And I'm just going to do a quick little excerpts from a
Oh, I love it.
pet I should get.
That's his new book. That's Dr. Seuss's new book.
And this has actually the publisher's comments in the back, because I understand this is a special year for you as you come up here. Pages I'm going to read. Because your time's going to change a little bit. The time may be now to make up my mind, but who knows what other good pets that I might find.
I like your expression.
I will do it right now. I will do it, I said. I will make up the mind that is up in my head. The dog or the rabbit, the fish or the cat. I picked one out fast with that, and then that was that. And then, I know Dr. Seuss has not been around for a while, but it looks like he added a page. June will be soon. It will be fast and the last. It will be happy and sad, but that's not bad. It will be time for a rest, knowing that you gave Madison the very best. Congratulations to our Cat in the Hat. Good luck to you, and that is that. So retirement awaits. I did it. That's...
Well, thank you very much. The mayor surprised me. I didn't expect that. I will lend anyone my Cat in the Hat suit that wants to borrow it for next year. So thank you very, very much. And it's been a pleasure teaching the children at Central Avenue School and coming here for many, many years. And I'm a little touched. Thank you.
And here is the book signed by your council members here.
Oh,
so
thank
you for
you.
all you've done for
That's
Madison.
great. Thank
And
you.
best of luck.
Thank you. I'm
And-
still here till June.
Yes.
The end of June.
Now to shift from the Cat in the Hat to reports from committees. Utilities. Mr. Wolkowitz.
Thank you, Mayor. Both utilities, electric and water, have been busy over the last couple of weeks. I won't go through the entire list, but let me tick off a few highlights. In the case of the electric department, they had to troubleshoot a nitrogen unit at the Kings Road substation. They did some performance cleaning and maintenance on their trucks, both the bucket and digger trucks. They did streetlight repairs, they did service upgrades, and they did mark-out requests. So it's been busy. Water seems even more so. The water samples were taken for the state-mandated testing for total chloroform, E. coli, volatile organic compounds, and it's ongoing. As you know, we get an annual report on the quality of our water. There were 24 requests for locating and marking underground utilities for homeowners, contractors, and other utilities. Sounds like a little bit of activity going on in town. There were 2 outside registers for water meters that were either repaired or replaced. There were 2 water shutoffs and disconnections for house demolitions, and meters were removed. And unfortunately, given the season, although I guess it's a good thing, there were 3 calls for no water because of frozen pipes, and water was shut off. 3 is unfortunate, but could easily have been many more, I suppose. And the ice rink was flooded for the 2nd time. So those of you who skate, it's a good time to go. As I said, this is just a sample of many things that went on over the last 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Health, Mr. Catanello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And now some wonderful facts about heart disease in men. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men in the United States, killing over 300,000 in the year 2009, or about 25% of all male deaths. Heart disease is the leading cause of death for men of most racial and ethnic groups in the United States, including African Americans, Native Americans, Alaska Natives, Hispanics, and whites. About 8.5% of all white men, 7.9% of black men, and 6.3% of Mexican Americans have coronary heart disease. Half of the men who die suddenly of coronary heart disease have no previous symptoms. Even if you have no symptoms, you may still be at risk for heart disease. And between 70 and 90% of sudden cardiac events occur in men. Signs and symptoms, which I have every day working on Wall Street: chest pain, chest discomfort, and chest pressure. I'm sorry for laughing. It's amazing. Like when markets are crazy, everybody has them. Some people say they just feel uneasy discomfort or vague discomfort, not pain that really hurts. Sometimes it feels more like heaviness or pressure. Risk factors include high blood pressure, high LDL cholesterol, smoking. Half of the Americans have at least one of these 3 risk factors. Several other medical conditions and lifestyle choices can also put people at higher risk for heart disease, including diabetes, overweight and obesity, poor diet, physical inactivity, or excessive alcohol use. There are many ways you can help reduce your chance of getting heart disease, such as knowing your blood pressure and keeping it under control, increasing your daily physical activity to about 30 minutes a day, stop smoking, don't smoke, test your blood sugar levels for diabetes, know your cholesterol and triglyceride levels. Ask your doctor for blood testing and increase the number of fresh fruits and vegetables on your diet on an early basis. Anyone looking for more information can contact the Madison Health Department. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Finance and Borough Clerk, Mr. Landrigan.
Mine will come at the beginning of the budget introduction.
All right, very good. Public Safety, Ms. Vitale.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a report from the Police Department. Officer Milanes, Duraco, Morales, and Strafacci have successfully completed their 1-year probationary period with the Madison Police Department. They've all done a fine job during their first year and will have a long and successful career ahead of them. The AAA will be hosting a monthly defensive driving class in Madison, which is open to the borough employees free of charge. AAA will compensate Madison Borough for use of the public safety facility. The Madison PBA Local 2092, Drew University, Madison Downtown Development Commission, and the Madison Chamber of Commerce will host a prison ball tournament at Drew University on Saturday, March 19. Proceeds from the event will benefit the Captain Joseph Cirillo Scholarship Fund. Per diem dispatcher Brian Castro was appointed and has begun training within the Communications Division of the Police Department. From the Fire Department, I'm going to read it in Lou's words as he wrote it. On Thursday, February 18, just before noon, our fire department responded to Whippany to a scene of a construction site accident. A crane was setting a 10,000-pound generator onto a concrete pad when tragedy struck. Without any warning, 2 of the 4 straps used to hoist the generator broke, and sadly the generator fell onto 2 construction workers. Both were pinned under the generator. The Whippany and Cedar Knolls fire departments were able to quickly remove 1 worker and then transport him to Morristown Medical Center. He died later that evening from his injuries. The second worker was sadly pronounced at the scene. Madison firefighters, along with firefighters from Morris Township, Whippany, and Cedar Knolls, were assigned the task of removing the pinned construction worker. The dangling generator was stabilized with a second crane was brought in to lift the generator up so the worker could be safely removed. Madison firefighters assisted with carrying out this unpleasant but necessary task of removing the victim with dignity and respect. These types of incidents are not the norm, but they are ones that we are all trained for. And that's from Chief DeRosa. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Community Affairs, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. From the seniors, they have many opportunities for cultural events for free or at a discount. The annual free dinner dress rehearsal for the spring musical is one that they are invited to for March 16th. And the annual day of service and spring cleaning opportunity occurs in May Day. And the Music and Arts Department at Madison High School is offering discounted tickets for seniors to their Arts Matter benefit with Jerry Veza on March 3rd. In addition, the Suburban Music Study Group provides free admission to their monthly concerts at the Madison Public Library, and the Discovery Orchestra discounted admission to their Drew University performance, as does the Opera at Florham, which performs at Fairleigh Dickinson University. All these events are publicized in the senior newsletter, providing easy access to the many affordable art venues in the immediate area. And meanwhile, historic venues in Madison are always easily accessed in Helene Corlett's monthly Looking Back column. Her latest topics have been former Mayor William Sterrett, builder of the Empire State Building, Echo Grove, the Seaman Estate where Kings Road School now stands, and snow plowing in the early 1900s. Her March column describes how the Bottle Hill Tavern, Widow Brown's move from Main and Waverly to Main Street to Main near Prospect was accomplished using only 1 horse. From the Downtown Development Commission, they want to remind everybody they're planning a great Taste of Madison with the Rotary and Chamber on March 7th. Tickets can be purchased at Gary's, or you can go to rosenet.org. And from the Recreation Department, spring sports teams are gearing up to begin practices in March. Thank you, Mayor.
You and Public Works and Engineering, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, from the Public Works Road Department. The road crews have been out working on patching the numerous potholes that the winter has brought us. From the Sewer Department, the men are out doing repair and other maintenance work at the Candlewood Pump Station. From Engineering, in terms of roads, the 2016 road reconstruction plans and specifications are complete and have been advertised. Receipt and public opening of bids will be on March 31st of this year. Quotes are also being obtained from vendors in the Morris County Co-op program for our mill and overlay program. In terms of the parks, the plans and specifications for the Billy Ellard Sports Field Site Remediation Phase 2 project will be advertised with a receipt and public opening of bids to be held on Thursday, April 14th. When finished this coming fall, the project will complete the soil removal and replacement of the 1 acre of land that is closest to the railroad fencing. It will close out the final issues we have with the state DEP and also allow for a greater utilization of the fields in the future. And finally, as liaison to the Housing Authority, on Saturday, the Housing Authority held its annual retreat. Also in attendance were most of the governing body and members of the Affordable Housing Corporation. The 4-hour session provided everyone with a good understanding of how Madison has met its affordable housing obligations over the past 4 decades. And we also had a very productive discussion about how we can work together to meet the latest challenge after the New Jersey Supreme Court sent out a new process in lieu of the stalled efforts at the Council on Affordable Housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any communications or petitions?
Yes, Mayor. Council received an email February 11th from Christine Mullen of Central Avenue regarding the downtown area.
Thank you. And now we're on to the first of two invitations for discussion. As mentioned before, this one is limited to items on our discussion agenda, and any discussions around budget will be held until after we have the budget discussion. So you can comment on the James Library appropriation, the DDC annual report, or any resolution. If you want to comment at any of those items, please step up to the lectern, state your name, your address, and the item you want to discuss, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anyone wishing to comment on those items? Tom, as a representative of the board, I think you can come up during the actual discussion if need. Okay. Any others wishing to comment? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting, and we move on to the appropriation of $125,000 for restoration and repair of the James Library. Astrid?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've got Deborah Starker, the director of the museum, and Tom Judd here also. But I'll just first briefly say that the Museum of Early Trades and Crafts, which is in the located in the James Building, has been undertaking the restoration and renovation of that beautiful building. And they came to the Open Space Trust Fund about 3 years ago and laid out the plans, a multi-year plan of the proposals and what they proposed to do. They had hired a consultant. And so they've done phase one. They're in the process of just about phase two will be completed by early February. And this work focused on mitigating the moisture ingress issues that are causing the building's deterioration and were referenced in the request form from 2013. And so phase three is what they're asking for today. What they're asking for from the Open Space Trust Fund is $125,000. That money will leverage money from the county, which I'll let them explain, and it protects a gem in town. It's a historic asset, and it needs to be preserved, and we have a willing partner with the museum who's willing to oversee this and make sure it gets done. So with that, I'll turn to
Tom and Deb. Come on up.
As Ashley said, I'm Thomas Judd. I'm chairman of the board, and somewhere behind me, right, is Deborah Starker, our executive director. I think you heard a pretty good synopsis. This is the third year of what's projected to be a 6-year project because of the available funding. We just have to take what money we can get in any given year. The request is for $125,000. A good bit of that goes for the required match from the county funds. We get a 4-to-1 match from them. Then in addition, there are professional services that have to be paid for that the county will not pay for, and some additional money for management of the project. The museum, for a long time, has assumed overall management of this project, and we intend to do that. We take our position as stewards of this building very seriously. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have. We did not bring any prepared discussion tonight.
Any questions for Tom? Rob?
How much are we getting from the county?
It's not clear. We're projecting about a $350,000 construction budget, about $375,000 of which we'll ask for about 80% of that from the county. The way this works, we have to have matching funds before we can go to the county. So that's why we're here first, to have the matching funds guaranteed. Then we get our professional services folks, the historic building architects firm, to prepare the drawings and specifications which are required before we can submit to the county. And part of that is the cost estimation. That's going on right now. So we don't have an exact figure. But the way this is broken up, based on the fact that roughly $300,000 is as much as you can get from the county, we've broken down this long project into these smaller pieces to fit within that.
So you figure of the 125 we're going to give you, roughly 75 will be used to secure the 4-to-1 match that you spoke about earlier.
That's right, yes. We have to guarantee that that money is in hand before we can apply to the county.
Okay. And then last year, I asked about any private fundraising, and I'm wondering if there's been any update to that in terms of private fundraising.
I'm going to ask Deborah to address that. She is our fundraising expert at the museum.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you need my name and everything? Deb Starker, 30 Beverly Road. We do fundraising all the time at the museum, but we have made a decision not to fundraise for the specific construction project because the construction project is a building that we don't own, and all of the fundraising efforts that I spend is to run the museum. And we manage the project. We put a lot of our sweat equity into the project and a lot of our time and we have an employee who actually spends most of our time managing the actual building project, but we are not in a position right now to fundraise for that.
Bob?
Yeah, thanks. Now, I know that you said you completed phases 1 and 2, and I know that big blue tarp is off the building. How did those 2 phases go? Were they pretty much done on schedule?
Yeah, pretty much on schedule. The only thing that needs to be done right now is the flat roof that's over the main entrance of the building.
Right.
It needs to have this liquid roof. It's a Kemper roof poured. They couldn't do that when they were supposed to because of the cold weather.
Right.
So,
and you got the money that you expected from the county for those?
Absolutely, and all of that is still covered, so that will probably take place in the next several weeks when the weather gets warmer, but that's part of the second phase.
Right.
That money is already in there.
And the county is aware of the 6-year duration of this project?
They are.
And that
The
you're coming
county
in pieces?
actually representative was just out about 2 weeks ago to do a walkthrough of where we were right now in the project.
So do you have a decent level of confidence that you're going to get this matching grant for this next level?
Yes, we do.
Next step.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Pat?
You said it's 6 years, but I seem to remember when this started, it was going to be a 4-phase project. Is that correct? Or is it now 6?
It's 6 years. It's 4 or 5. The roof we're projecting is going to take 2 years to complete because of the cost.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not so much the years. I guess I'm really asking how many more times does the museum expect to come back for additional funding beyond this round?
Probably 3 more times.
Okay.
Once more to finish up the exterior masonry, and then 2 more times after that to take care of the roof. The roof has to be replaced. It's 116 years old.
Okay. But I thought when this started, it was a 4-phase project. Has it been stretched out at some point?
It may have been. As we get into this and we realize what we're doing, I think we're getting more accurate every year in what we're projecting.
Okay.
And as I said, it's because of the money from the county that they just won't let us to go in and ask for $500,000 or $600,000 in 1 year.
So you're estimating that this year plus the next 3 years, you'll be coming back and asking for that amount of money from the open space fund?
About the same amount of money. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any further?
That roof is a beautiful roof. And if I look, I had a slate roof in the first house I lived in Madison, and it was not nearly as beautiful as the roof on that building, and it cost a lot of money. You're confident that that the roof cost will be us giving you $250,000 and you getting some money from the county that would be able to cover it? I mean, that looks like a big job, that roof.
It may be. We've said projected 2 phases. We have not done any real cost estimating at this point. It is a very difficult job. It's not only a very carefully hand-selected slate. There are a great deal of terracotta decorative elements up there, and some of those may have to be replaced. We just don't know at this point.
So then is it safe to assume that it may be more than 4 more years?
There's a possibility. I can't really tell you at this point. We're just trying to lay out the best guess we can give you at this point and take it a year at a time. This year we want to finish up 2 of the remaining 3 exterior walls. Nothing has been done to them in 115 years that we know of, so we have to rake out and repoint all of that masonry. And the big thing for this year hopefully will be the replication and replacement of the finials up on top of the tower. If you've been by there, you'll see there are just a couple of kind of lonesome iron rods sticking up where they used to be. as I had told you last year, they were very badly cracked and kind of disintegrated when we got them down, so we got them down just in time.
Just one last question, just a point of clarification. So it's really defining your schedule and limiting you is the amount of money that you can request in pieces from the county.
That's right.
That's what I
That
thought.
sets the tone for the
Yep.
whole thing. We have what we think is a very good funding process. It's a multi-partner funding process, the borough and the county providing the funds. We have professional services watching over the whole thing, and we're taking care of managing the whole project. But with projection costs of construction, it's hard to tell 2 and 3 years ahead of time. It's the best guess we have at this point.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you very much. And so this ordinance is Ordinance 8, which is up for introduction tonight. Hey, Downtown Development Commission Annual Report. Astrid.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Lisa, oh yes, we've got
There is-
the Chair of the Downtown Development Commission, Mike Kopis, and Lisa, the Program Director here to make the presentation. And I want to thank Lisa for all her hard work and putting this document together. Very helpful. Thank
Second
you.
that.
Okay, good, Mike. I figured it was okay to say that.
Again, my name is Mike Kopis. I'm the current chair of the Downtown Development Commission. Russ Stern, who was the past chair for 2015, wanted to be here tonight, but he had a previous commitment, so I'm kind of pinch hitting for him for tonight to let you know some of the accomplishments the DDC had over his leadership. Everybody has hard copies, so I'm not going to go, into great detail as far as the report. But if you have any questions afterwards, please free to throw them at him. Sure, if I don't know, Lisa knows everything, so we can take it from there. Really, 2015 was about strengthening our, I want to call signature events within the Madison. If you're talking about Bottle Hill Day, I can go on, May Day, Taste of Madison, Scavenger Hunt, Sidewalk Art and Gallery and Gala, Sidewalk Sounds, the concert series that we do with the museum, and the Holidays Arts Festival. We really wanted to streamline processes and really try to fine-tune what we're doing to make them bigger and better, and I think we've accomplished that in a lot of them. I think the Farmers Market has really taken off in its new location. Bottle Hill Day, with all its recancellations and rescheduling, I still think went really, really well with a lot of people's hard work. So we really wanted to concentrate on that in 2015. I think we really accomplished that. We still obviously are going to concentrate on it a little bit more as we go forward, but a lot of good discussion during the DDCs, and I'm looking forward to 2016. Some of the standing committees we have, we've 4 standing committees: the Public Improvement Committee, University Relations, Sign and Facade, and Marketing and Economic Development Committee. Just real quick, some highlights. Public Improvement Committee, they really concentrate on the downtown and the physical appearance of the downtown and bringing some people downtown and some smaller events and things like that. Some highlights, they purchased a new sound system for the sidewalk sounds. We got some those colorful Adirondack chairs for the events we hold downtown, so it's a little bit more welcoming and people feel like they can sit down and not just pass the music by, as they're standing there in the street. We managed and funded repairs to the Waverly Clock, which seems to get damaged here and there throughout its life. Purchased new LED holiday lights for the trees on Waverly Place. We, every so often, as you can see, partial trees go out with the lighting, so we actually got LED lights this year, made the investment, which was fairly significant because of the expense of them, and I think it really showed this year as far as how they look during the holiday season. University Relations, we organized another successful Drew Town Tour, where we had 377 first-year students take a tour downtown with all kinds of volunteers, from Madison residents to a lot of yourselves, to business owners, who really just took the students downtown. And their actually first experience in downtown Madison was eating lunch in one of our restaurants. So that was their first exposure, and it was always a great day. It's one of my favorite days of the year. It went really well this year. New sign, Madison train station, noted that Madison's the home of Drew University. That was a lot of excitement surrounding that. And our continued partnership, Drew's continued partnership with the DDC as far as Bottle Hill Day and Family Weekend, where we coordinate Family Weekend during Bottle Hill Day. So it's really a nice partnership where we are able to send our families down to Bottle Hill Day when they're visiting their kids. So the students go downtown with their parents, they eat, they enjoy it, and then we follow it up with the fireworks down up at Drew University later in the day. And it makes for a really nice weekend. And we're lucky enough this year with the the rescheduling of Bottle Hill Day, that the fireworks were able to move with it, which was pretty exciting. Sign and facade. When I talked about process before, we really worked hard this year to streamline things as far as sign and facade. It's been a little bit of a bumpy road over the years as far as 100% customer service, and we focused on that, and I think we've really streamlined the process, and I've seen a noticeable difference as far as the applicants and applicant satisfaction of how we can interact with them and help them, and just, you know, have not really a oversight of it, but a partner in the sign process, you know, the approval process. Somebody they can bounce ideas off and stuff like that, so when they go for approval, you know, they've had some input from the town and know what the town is talking about, so I think that has gone a long way too. Marketing and economic development. We've been researching some marketing videos and options that we're going to try to be implementing over the next few months, or like over the next year, working hand in hand with the Town Square publications for the biannual Madison magazine, and continued, obviously, to build the Love Madison, Shop Madison program through distribution of bags, magnets, especially through the expanded reach of social media. And this group here, I think with the well, let me go on to 2016. 2016, although we really focused on event structure and streamlining in 2015, I think 2016 is going to be a lot of concentration on making Madison downtown as strong and viable as possible. You know, we talk a lot about it during the committee meetings and the commission meetings about, you know, businesses can close for 1,000 different reasons. You know, somebody could retire. You know, somebody just might not want to do it anymore. You're not going to stop that. But what we want to try to do as far within our power is to make the process as streamlined, as smooth as possible for people to move back in. It's about the turnover, how long things are vacant, and how easy it is, or whatever it is to get back in. So we're really trying to concentrate on that, and we're partnering obviously with you guys, everybody here, with the leadership of Ben Walkowitz over there on the on doing a little bit of a study to figure out part of market analysis downtown, what we can do to put Madison downtown in the best position to succeed going forward. Not just this year, because I said stores closed for a variety of reasons, not next year, but really set it up for the next 5 to 10 years and really stay on the forefront of managing a downtown. I think that's what we're really focusing on 2016, and we're really, really looking forward to it. I think we're structured. We got some incredible talent on the downtown commission from, all different walks of life, all different expertises, all different professions, and the mix is really good right now, and I think we're going to have a very successful 2016. I think that's about it. I don't know if you have any questions or anything, and it's going to be posted, the annual report for everybody here, it's going to be posted on the website, I believe tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So you feel free to read through it. Any questions?
Any questions for Bob?
Well, this is just more of a comment than anything else. When I was your liaison, one thing I did notice is that you are a model committee in the sense that you're self-funding and you do a lot to make our downtown better. When you mentioned about helping revitalize some of the empty storefronts, I think that is vital to this downtown. And all I want to say is, and I know Ben is working with you, but if there's anything that we can do to help you in that regard, even rounding up some volunteers, let us know.
Can I write that down? No.
Absolutely.
Anything else? And we welcome suggestions, too, from if anybody ever has any suggestions for us or something they notice downtown that they'd like to see improved, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us at any time, because we'll be glad to take a look at it and partner with people and really address whatever we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and again, thank you for the great work of the committee, and just a extra thank you. Most people may not realize it, and Lisa can get very upset, but Lisa is a volunteer as our program director for the DDC, and so her work has already been noticed, not only is excellent, but done because of her generosity and dedication to Madison. So thank you so much, Lisa. All right, moving on to the next item, budget. Bob, you want to open up?
All right.
Now, on the agenda tonight, you're going to notice that there's going to be a discussion on the 2016 budget. It's called the final adjustments. And what this is going to entail is collecting and discussing our final comments and then gaining council consensus, because that will allow Jim Burnett, our CFO, and the administration to prepare the final budget document that's going to go to the state. The budget will have its formal introduction or official introduction on March 14th, and then on April 11th, the council will vote for its actual adoption. Now, what I can tell you is this. We are contemplating an electric rate credit at the end of this year, and that'll be proposed by Council President Wolkowitz by way of an ordinance at an upcoming meeting. Now, if approved, this credit would be based upon the borough's performance in procurement of electric versus our use of electric surplus over the course of the year. So when Ben and I spoke about it, what we discussed is this, and he rightly pointed this out, that this approach bases relief that the taxpayers will receive upon monies that we have in hand, not upon monies that we hope to have. So it's really going to be what we pay versus what we use out of the electric surplus, and if it's feasible given any unforeseen circumstances that occur during the year, let's say God forbid another hurricane occurs, we have to use some of that money, that we can give the taxpayers and residents relief. Okay. I've already asked the borough administration to determine the best way to provide this credit to the residents, be it a credit in their tax bill, credit in their electric bill, and that'll come out at the end of the year. Now, in regards to the overall budget, this is a good budget that we're proposing. Madison is in very good shape. We have our AAA rating, and in this budget, it includes $750,000 in funds dedicated to capital improvements. There are no staff reductions or changes in the services provided to the town, and that was made clear to us over the year. The residents want our services. And finally, this budget absorbs a large increase in sewage processing and pension costs, with only a 1.5% increase in the municipal property taxes. Ready, Jim? All yours.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mayor. I'll give a shorter presentation than what I did earlier in the month. Not repeating what was said then, but covering some new information that has come out. Council Friday, there's packets up there if anyone wants a copy to follow along, it'll be up here. But as Bob Landrigan mentioned, this is the budget process schedule that we have outlined over a month ago, and our hope is that this evening Council comes to a consensus on the major points of the budget so I can move forward on drafting the actual state document. That's the legal size document. That's a little more cryptic than the more simplified versions that we displayed to the residents, and that would then be introduced on March 14th with the budget hearing and adoption on April 11th. By maintaining that schedule, we will be able to maintain our ability to receive 100% of the state aid that we get from the state of New Jersey. There is a best practices checklist, and if we don't adhere to the schedule and introduce and adopt a budget within a certain period of time, that can impact the amount of state aid that we receive. So with this particular presentation, I wanted to point out some things that have changed since earlier in the month, the first presentation we had. We had our unaudited annual financial statements that were submitted last week to the state of New Jersey. That will end up becoming the basis of the audit and the more detailed information that's done later on in the year. But that is information that we use to refine the budget estimates that we bring you, the performance of surplus and alike. The good news is that the surplus estimates for the water utility, the electric utility, and municipal operating were all better than we had initially and conservatively forecast. Also changed in the budget that we're submitting this evening is a change in the 5-year capital budget plan. Administrator Cody went back to the department heads and spoke with them and was able to refine the 5-year capital plan and reduce that down by about $880,000. If you recall, earlier in February, we talked about a pretty significant gap where the budget initially had it funding $3.5 million in capital improvement fund, but we had a $4.2 million need on average over the course of 5 years. So there was this $700,000 gap that we were concerned with. This budget narrows that gap to a manageable point. The budget, as Councilman Landrigan said, all services are retained at current levels. There's an additional $750,000 in funding for capital, no staff reduction, and a 1.5% tax increase. Increased funding for salt, brine, and snow removal, and absorption of some significant increased costs in debt service, in sewage treatment processing, and in the state pension bill. So I talked briefly about the 5-year capital plan. This is the revised summary page. The 5-year capital plan is a multiple page where each one of these lines has details behind it. Council received the details. I'm just in this budget showing the summary of the 5-year capital plan. We're able to keep pressing the wrong button. I apologize. We were able to get this number down here. This was about $4.2 million. We were able to get that down. That brings this number going from $4.2 million to about a little more than $4 million. Is kind of closing that funding gap that we have with capital. The major changes were some changes in the police department, the fire department allowing us to take a truck that was supposed to be funded completely in 2020 and have that purchased in 2021 and split funded over 2 years. The reduction of costs of paving the parking lot at the library after we got refined estimates and alike. So we're happy that we're able to bring that number down. We'll continue. I think we'll continue to have discussions on capital and I would encourage council to do that with the engineer and with the department heads throughout the year so we can continue to get a better and better look at our 5-year capital needs. I think this is the best look, the best 5-year capital plan we've had in a number of years, but I think the numbers in 19 and 20 are still a little soft. And I think we can do better in refining those numbers and ultimately trying to determine how much in capital the municipal operating budget needs to fund. So here's the municipal operating budget. Apologize, it's a little small on screen. This will also be online as well. And as mentioned, the municipal surplus, which I'll touch base on in a few minutes, was better performance than we had thought. So the major changes to this budget are an increase here. This was $3.9 million back in February, earlier in February. We were able to comfortably push that up to $4.2 million. So that's an additional $300,000 in revenue on that side that we were able to basically claim. The library figure here was revised down. The estimate that I had given and a conservative one, the state comes out with a municipal information sheet. That municipal information sheet is what drives that actual mill rate calculation. And so that number was able to be dropped. And then the capital improvement fund number here went from $3.5 million to $3.8 million. So back here we talk about needing about $4 million a year in capital. We're going to fund 3.8 of it a year. We think going forward in this budget, we project 3.8 million the next 3 years. And people can say, geez, that doesn't make sense. Wait a minute, we have $4 million of projects and only $3.8 million of funding. We can appropriate $200,000 for a project, and it may only take $180,000. That $20,000 goes back to the capital improvement fund. We can appropriate funds and receive state DOT funding, as we have done just recently with Ridgedale Avenue, where we received hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding coming back for that. So there's that gap between 3.8 and 4.1. While it may seem like we have a gap, we feel comfortable that we don't, given the other sources of revenue that go to the capital improvement fund. So I'm going to, as I said, quickly go through the presentation here, and then I want to be able to step aside and let you guys talk and debate.
Actually, just one quick question. I didn't see anything that explained how the first line, the $4.2 million, was achieved. Did we?
Go through that. That's in a couple of slides back.
Okay.
fiscal surplus number we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So this here is a slide that I think we had in the last presentation as well. It just talks about property taxes as a percent of total revenues. We have increased revenues significantly by use of surplus, and we've increased appropriations and increased capital improvement fund appropriations significantly. So that's part of it. But you can see that property taxes are, we're relying less on property taxes and more on other sources of revenue to fund the municipal budget. Some say that was good, some say that was bad, but that's the trend that we're moving towards.
Didn't the Strategic Planning Committee say it was bad?
Yes.
Did we adopt their guidelines?
Yes, we did.
Yes. Part of the presentation, and it doesn't really matter who does this, but we need to explain why we consciously differed from what the guidelines would tell you. So I don't know what point that happens, but
There's a sheet to review it. I guess we can do it then.
So from a municipal surplus standpoint, we had initially estimated 3.9 million or 3.8 million in generation of surplus. It's 4.2 million. This is what Mr. Rowe was asking about. How do we generate surplus? Where does it come from? How did that $4.2 million number that we put into the budget, where did that come from? It comes from strategic planning, in that we want to use about the amount of surplus that we generate. We're at the top end of the strategic planning guideline for the amount of surplus we should have on hand. Therefore, we should be using all of what we generated the previous year. We generated 4.253. I'm just going to point to that number right there. And how do we generate that? Line 7, non-taxable revenues were better than anticipated. We don't always know what our construction code fees are going to be like, what all the different revenue streams that we have. We have over 100 revenue lines that come in. We estimate that, but sometimes they come in better. And they typically do, as you can see on line 7. Delinquent tax collection is what it is. It's delinquent taxes that were collected from the prior year. Current year taxes, we estimate that we're going to collect this much in taxes. We don't know. We know we're not going to collect 100% in taxes because we know there are going to be people that may not be able to pay. So we estimate a number, and we have what's called a reserve for uncollected tax, and that covers us. That money ends up lapsing to surplus if the actual tax collection comes in better than expected, which is a good thing. You clearly want to have your tax collection rate to be as high as possible. So that's where a surplus is generated. That's number 9, current year taxes. Cancellation of prior year appropriations, line 10. That is when a department head does a good job and doesn't spend all their line items. There used to be, many years ago before I was here, you'd hear about the mentality, and you hear it in corporations too. You better spend your entire budget or you're going to lose it next year. The department heads don't do that now. They understand that council will continue to fund the line items that they need, and that there may be some years where they need more money and some years where they may need less money in a particular line item. We use the example of salt and brine as a great example. One year we may need a lot, another year we may not need as much. So lapsing appropriations, prior year appropriations generate surplus. Miscellaneous revenue and other revenues, those are small revenues that weren't even revenues that we would anticipate. And then finally, we have the line of FEMA. We didn't get any money this year, but it's there for historical purposes for 2012 and 13. So you can see a good trend. If you were to back out the FEMA numbers, you can see a good trend that we're generating 3.6, kind of trending upward towards $4.1, $4.2 million number. Administration feels comfortable that in the future years we'll be generating $4 to $4.2 million in surplus. So we'll use that as a continued number. The last thing we want to do is anticipate in the municipal budget $4.2 million in municipal surplus as a revenue, and then next year we don't get nearly that amount of money, and we have this funding gap. Geez, we're off by $600,000. Where are we going to find $600,000 of additional revenue? We feel as though we're doing and council is doing an excellent job in helping us set this budget so we can get to a very stable and manageable amount of municipal surplus that we would use, that we would generate and then use in the municipal budget. So what I'll do is I'll continue to go through. We'll talk about water utility, electric utility, the strategic planning guidelines, and then I can answer any questions. The water utility, we had initially estimated a little higher earlier in the month what the sales were, but once we did our unaudited annual financial statements, you can see the 215 actual line here is the final performance of the water utility, if you will. We sold or had sales of over $2.68 million. The other small miscellaneous revenues, cancellation of prior year appropriations. I just talked about that on the municipal side. It's the same on the water side. The water utility has its own budget, and if they don't spend all of it, then appropriations will lapse, and that generates, in essence, a revenue for when we look at it in this kind of schedule of performance. Expenses, lines 9, 10, 11 are operational expenses, capital improvement, and what we had been reserving for the automated meters. What I want to point out is that due to the strategic planning process and bringing in professionals in the Utility Advisory Committee and some reports that were presented when the department heads and when Tom DiBiase came in and spoke, and Bob Vogel, we're increasing significantly the amount of capital that we're reserving on the water side because we see an increasing need to spend that. The water capital figures, which are in your 5-year capital plan, are much higher, and that's just investment in the system. Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's a great tie you're wearing.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. So we reserved $1 million for the automated meters. What are we doing with that money?
That money's sitting in reserve. We are in the process of finalizing the demo program that we're going to have, which will include both water and electric meters. We actually approved an appropriation at the end of last year for that. There's 2 companies, Itron and Elster, that we're doing final vetting on. Even though it's a small pilot program of $35,000, if we keep building on that system and building on that system, at some point we're basically marrying ourselves to one company. So we really want to make sure it's the right company. We could go out tomorrow and say we're going to do Itron, but the last thing I'd want to do is come in 2 years from now and say, well, we really decided Elster is the better system, so all the meters that we put in over the last 2 years we're going to replace again. So I anticipate that we'll be coming to council with an award of a contract based on that capital appropriation within the next 45 days. And then from there, we'll be able to test it, and it's going to be testing both the electric and the water meters, handheld devices, but our ability to start collecting that important information for our highest electric rate customers. So this is a summary of the water utility's performance, if you will, kind of like a business. It's not a business, but it's a separate entity, and this is very much like a revenue and expense schedule. From there, that annual surplus that's generated, some people might want to call it profit. In the municipal world, we call it surplus. That surplus that gets generated is shown in another schedule, and that's the schedule up here. We generated $790,000 in surplus this year. $790,000 number here being repeated up here. So at the beginning of the year, line 1 under 2015 actual, we started the year with $1.6 million in surplus for the water utility. We utilized $500,000 of that in the municipal budget, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We generated $790,000. That's a good situation when you're utilizing, when you're generating more or the same as you're utilizing in the budget. That's a good situation. So the balance grew at the end of this year. We don't anticipate that continuing, to be honest with you, and our projections show that, which is why I've highlighted these 3 numbers here. These are estimates, but I think they're good. They may not come true, but because of the increased use of capital improvement in the upcoming years, we don't anticipate generating as much surplus. Where we generated $790,000 here, we think it's going to be a whole lot less in the out years. That actually is the analogy that you've heard me in the past use, where there's less water going into the bathtub than it's coming out of the bathtub, so the water level starts to go down. The water level, no pun intended, in the water utility surplus we're projecting to be going down. So this estimated surplus number here, going from $1.8 million to $1 million, council needs to be aware of that and needs to, in a long-term sense, decide how much should the amount of transfer of surplus change and be reduced, should rates be changed or like, but at some point that we won't be able to continue at that rate. So I talked real briefly about that surplus number, and this is just a quick schedule that shows where the surplus goes. We have $500,000 that I mentioned here being utilized in the budget, which is line 2. That's just summarized there in the yellow. And we go back to our municipal budget, that big line item, and you'll see under line 1B, water surplus operating right here. There's that $500,000 number right there. So that's just tying in the two schedules between the water utility and our municipal budget, where those funds go. So shifting over to the electric utility, it's always interesting to look at our top 50 customers. These are our top 50 customers. I apologize for the size. University's number 1, the Verizon cell tower is number 50, and there's a lot of customers in between and of varying sizes. But you can see if we generate $22.8 million in sales for the electric utility, over $9 million of it, over 40% of those sales are 50 customers. We have 6,721 electric customers. The top 50 represent 40%. The bottom, the other 6,671 represent only 60%. So a real simple math, you take the 6,000 plus customers and divide it by the number of sales that they have, and that tells you that those customers that have an average bill, it could be residents, it could be a smaller store downtown, have an average bill of $2,000 a year, which is about $170 a month. So, other than the top 50 customers where you have customers that have significantly large electric consumption, everyone else is, on average, a relatively small customer. Going to the electric utility performance, this is the same type of schedule that we have for the water utility. We expanded it this year at the request of Councilman Rowe, and we're going to do our best shot at tracking expenses on our electric purchases in a more detailed fashion. But this shows many more years because we just happen to have the history of it. But it shows the actual on the bottom section, the actual performance of the electric utility, how much in revenues came in, and then the expenses. From 2006 to 2015, this schedule had a line called purchased power, and that was really lines 9, 10, 11, and 12, but it wasn't broken out. We're now breaking that out to show the different costs associated with purchased power. The largest is the actual electricity, the actual commodity coming through the wire, but there are other costs involved. You've heard in the past us talk about capacity. It's not anything to do with the amount of wattage or voltage, whatever it is coming through the line. It has to do with having power plants that are there for us on the hottest days of the year. So, and there's a great explanation of how that's calculated on RoseNet, if anyone wants to know. But it's significant. It's $2.5 to $3.5 million a year in terms of the actual costs. Transmission is the cost of getting the power to the Borough of Madison from where it's being generated. And that cost, along with the capacity cost, are charged by PJM, which is our regional transmission organization. And so they have the large high-tension power lines that can, and we have to basically rent space on that line, if you will, or buy capacity on those lines so we can get the power from the power plants to the Borough of Madison. You may have heard in the past, and you'll hear us talk in the future, if we ever do build generation here in Madison, an actual generation unit in Madison, we won't pay that transmission cost for anything that's generated here because we don't have to, it's already here. We won't pay those capacity costs to a certain extent because we'll have our own generation unit that we can use to help during the hottest days of the year. So we broke out those expenses, and as you can see, based on what our initial estimate was to the actual, we had an excellent year in the electric utility. We talked about it being one of the hottest years recently, so sales were robust. It wasn't 100-degree days, but we had a lot of warm days. And so we had $22.8 million in cash collections, and we were able to keep our costs down through some excellent purchases of contracts. So we generated this year in surplus $7.892 million. That's this number right here. You see that number just like in the water utility, the stuff up here in our utility performance. I think of this is where the surplus levels are. So you can see that the surplus levels are excellent, but you can also see that we're utilizing a lot of the surplus in the municipal budget. In 2016, we're estimating in this budget, as it stands right now, using $7.2 million in surplus. We generated $7.9 million in surplus. That's better than in years past where we had a beginning balance in the surplus and it only generated a smaller amount in the prior year and basically drained that balance down to almost zero. That's what this number is right here. What we've called in the past on the municipal side free balance. It's line 5. If we have at the beginning of, let's look at 2014, we had a beginning balance of $6.3 million in surplus. We used $5.8 million, and so we only had $500,000 left. This past year for 2014, we had $6.4 million. We used $6.2 million. So we only, at the beginning of the year, we only had $200,000 left in surplus. Those funds can be used by council in an emergency situation. So it's important to have a certain amount of free balance. We have it in the municipal budget. We have it in the water utility. We don't really have it right now in the electric utility. So I do also want to note that, and we've talked about it a little bit at past council meetings, that capacity costs are expected to go up. That's due to the polar vortex and some issues that happened at PJM and the Regional Transmission Organization where they were very close to not being able to satisfy all the electric needs during that incident. So they had to change the billing and charges for capacity.
Take a breath for a second. Pat has a question.
So a couple things. First, thank you for breaking this out. It'd actually be great if you could actually break it out going backwards to 13, just so we could do a full comparison as we've stepped into the new contracts. I looked at our contracts, and I don't understand how the block contract numbers you came up with, because the way I view it, this year should be cheaper than last year. Next year should be cheaper than the year after, and the year after that should even be cheaper, and by fairly significant amounts. So I wasn't sure why you had just a small decrement going down next year, and then those numbers going back up again, because we've locked in for almost all of that electricity, and it's just been going down. Our average cost from June of 15 through this year is like a little over $50 a megawatt. This coming year it's going to be 42. The following year it's going to be 42. And then the year after that it's in the 30s. So it seems like it should just keep going down at this point.
Part of it has to do with the contracts that we have aren't calendar year contracts, they're energy delivery year contracts.
I understand that. But it's still, they're still going down. And so you don't recognize the full value of the savings. In the first year, you only get 7/12 of it because we cover the first 5 months under one contract, the next 7. But either way, it's still showing it going down. The other question I had is, it seems like, again, in terms of the balances that we're getting to, we're holding on to a fairly substantial amount of money by the time we get to 2018. I think, again, we should take a look at, when we project out, how much money we're going to have in all the different surplus accounts. Because, again, I think we're getting to the point where we're hanging on to a lot of money that's coming from ratepayers, taxpayers. They're all the same. And I would not be in favor of running all of these up at the rate that we're going. It's nice to have money available for emergencies, but the question is, what should that number be amongst all our budgets, not just any one of them? And then I guess the other question is, because it's not really factored in here, but I don't know if you want to get into the details, but can somebody at least tell us if the numbers work out here the way you expect them to, what type of credit you'd be looking to give back to the ratepayers at the end of this year? And would it be applied to every ratepayer, residents? How would you do that?
I'll take it from here. We don't know what the percentage is going to be yet, because it's a year-based analysis, meaning where we sit at the end of this year, at the end of 16, will determine how much of a credit we can give each individual taxpayer, and it's across the board. Every taxpayer, every ratepayer in the borough would get a reduction or a credit.
A fixed amount per
It would be based
ratepayer?
upon your usage.
Percentage.
Percentage
And
of
be a
your
percentage.
usage.
Okay. So again, if 2016 worked out as budgeted, you have no idea right now how many dollars you'd be applying towards that credit?
Well, we don't want to get into that yet because we still have a long summer to go.
No,
We
no,
don't know.
I understand that, but I'm not saying that things won't change. But if things worked out the way they're budgeted for 2016, what type of number would you be looking to give back to ratepayers?
Percentage?
Percentage, yeah.
Jim, what would you say?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the capital use and on these estimates, as Bob said. It could be 2%, it could be 5%. As I talked about before, the average customer, other than those top 50, has an average bill of about $2,000 a year, $170 a month. 2% full rate reduction, is $3.40 a month. And we're doing that based on a projection that we believe that the performance of the utility will work out as such. By waiting until the end of the year, we say, okay, we did perform as we had estimated, and therefore we're able to guarantee it, and that dollar amount will be more significant. Instead of it being $3.40, it'll be $42 on someone's December electric bill. That might be more significant. That could be up to half of their December electric bill. So, and that's for the average person. That's $170 a month bill. So there's, I really think the best way to look at it is to look at it nominally instead of percentage-wise, and say, okay, let's look at how much surplus we think you think you're going to need in the out years for the municipal budget, or for the following year in the municipal budget, and then how much is left over, and how much of that do you want to, quote unquote, give back as a dividend?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that right now I don't know the answer. I'm still in process of trying to figure out the best way to administer this so that the cost of administration is minimal. It may well turn out that administration will determine how in fact the money is given out, whether it's a credit or a check or whatever. At the time I come back to the council with a proposal, I'll have that information for you.
I mean,
It's a fair question.
Yeah, I'm not so much interested in mechanics at this point. It's more, really, how much are you looking to try to save taxpayers, ratepayers, if things work out the way they do in 16, 17, 18?
No, my point about the mechanics is that I have to have the mechanics down before we can implement a program, or before I can come back. So that's what I've been focused on. These numbers have changed since the last presentation. I figured I'd let them settle down before, in fact, running the pro formas and trying to estimate what we'd have in 2016. That will come at the point at which I, make a proposal to the council about how to do this.
I think basically if you look at line 2 versus line 3, how much do you need to utilize in the budget versus how much was generated, that's really going to be where that number ultimately comes from. So how much was generated in the current year, that happens, and you end up knowing that at the end of the year. So this year we generated $7.9 million. How much is utilized in the budget in the upcoming year? We end up knowing that in the budget cycle, and we can probably get close to anticipating that and expecting that as we have in the out years and estimating that. So looking at lines 2 versus lines 3 is going to ultimately get you to where that number is going to be.
But if you're looking at it from that perspective, aren't you really waiting until you start to set next year's budget in place to decide how much you need from the current surplus to apply to next year's budget?
Yes.
So you're really looking at a credit in next year, not this year.
I think the credit could happen towards the end of this year because it's really the summer months of performance that we need to know, and then a comfort level on how much surplus is needed by in the upcoming budget year, and I think that's really driven by capital. So if we can review capital over the course of this upcoming year in April, May, June, July, and August, and we get a real good solid feel on what the capital could be, because that's really what drives the amount of electric utility surplus that's used. It's almost all there is a certain amount for operating, but a lot of it is being driven by the amount of capital. If it comes back that we only need to use $3.5 million or pull $3.5 million in capital improvement, then that number is better.
But the main reason you wouldn't need more from the electric surplus is because other parts of the budget are performing well. I mean, for instance, next year you're anticipating you're going to be able to get $300,000 from the general surplus to apply to capital. I think that's what you projected. Now, if we don't end up with $4.5 million of surplus coming out of this year that you feel comfortable using, that number is going to have to come down. So, again, unless you really have a solid feeling by December, I'm not quite sure how you're going to make a decision until you're, at least at this point, in next year's budget.
I think we'll be in a much better position to be able to have rough estimates on surplus in the November time frame of this year.
I just want to add to this that until this afternoon, I had no idea this would even be a topic. So
well, yeah, it's unfortunate we're having a conversation. But somebody brought it up, so
it's just I mean, you're asking very relevant questions, but I haven't had an opportunity to begin to focus on them.
Okay,
So,
then I'll give you some.
Thank you. Just so we can move on. That obviously we'll have a full discussion on doing this. We did promise that there would be discussion related to rates, or that this is a new option on that. So we need to do that in the very near future. So as soon as we see logistics, and I think there is one of our municipally owned utilities that may have a similar program, so we can learn from that and come back with that.
Just a very quick add-on to this. This is intended to be independent from the program we've had in place for our lowest income residents who've been receiving a $100 a year rebate. That should continue. It's a separate program.
Yeah. The other thing I note, and I think this has been something you brought up about general, I'm sorry if it's not my turn. Let me just finish this off. General capital, it also applies here. You know, we've got a very kind of up and down electric capital. We also have a fairly significant amount of money, I think, coming into this year that's in the capital fund. I'd like to be able to see a program where we kind of look at 4 or 5 years and try to smooth this out through a combination of either moving things around or utilizing some of the capital surplus that's in the extra capital that's in the electric capital fund in the years where we need a bit more, and then possibly replenishing it in the next years. But to have it go from 900 down to 500, from a starting point of 400, is also going to make it more challenging when you try to do some sort of rebate program, I think.
Yeah, I also, if you don't mind, I would add to that's been an objective with all the capital requirements, right? For exactly that reason. When we were trying to get the budget to be a much more predictable event, and you can't do that if you allow your capital expenditures to go up and down like this. One other quick note, and that is that the Strategic Planning Committee that focused on overall capital for the municipality, I have to reconvene them and congratulate them all. They had come up with a number of $4 million a year of what we would need to maintain our municipal capital. And they got about as close as you possibly could without being right on top of it, which is comforting.
I expected it to be 10 or 20%. It's pretty close.
Very close.
Okay.
So the next 2 slides I won't talk too much about. It's identical to the water utility, how the numbers in the electric utility track back to the municipal budget. I think council understands that. Anybody has any questions on that can come back to me. You've seen a chart like this, similar, that was put out in a sheet that was sent out with in everyone's utility bill. This has been refined a little bit. It shows the per-person municipal tax calculated for Madison and surrounding communities and the services that are provided within that tax. And as you can see, Madison is a relatively low municipal tax compared to our neighboring communities. We're the lowest in per-person municipal tax, and we have all of the various services provided within that, including garbage, curbside yard waste, sewer, fall leaf pickup, a professional paid fire department, a municipal electric utility, a senior van, and this year we added the number of crossing guards. That's a new line, and it was just surprising to us when we contacted some of our other neighboring communities to find out that Morris Township had 1 crossing guard for the entire municipality. Florham Park had 2. Where the Borough of Madison funds 35 crossing guards. And as a reminder, those are funded in the municipal budget, not in the Board of Ed budget, to the tune of $275,000. So I think that's important to point out. The strategic planning guidelines are referenced here and were referenced earlier. So we'll kind of go one by one. Guideline 1A, are we satisfying it? This year, I'd say yes, we are. We're basically utilizing less surplus than was generated in the prior year. Since we're at the top end of the amount of surplus that we're supposed to be holding in totality, which is Guideline B, we want to use the full amount. At some point in time, if Guideline 1B is above 25%, one of the two guidelines has to be wrong. We either have too much surplus or we're using more surplus than we generated to get us back in line. So those two guidelines are kind of at odds with each other, and the Strategic Planning Committee knew that. So Guideline 1A, we're in compliance with. Guideline 1B, we have a little more municipal surplus than the guideline states. That just means that we're in a better, stronger financial position. But you can see 2016 estimate is lower, so we should hopefully work our way back into that band of 20 to 25% in the out years. I did not estimate municipal surplus in the out years. I did with other things, but that's a very challenging estimate, so I chose not to project that out. Surplus in excess of 25% should only be used for capital and debt service. We haven't decided to do that or not do it, so I just kind of put that out there as a guideline. But a vast majority of municipal surplus is being used for operations, but we can also use surplus for operating or for capital, and I showed that as a projection in the out years. Guideline 2, I think, is an important one. It's the operation shortfall. It's basically what is not covered by municipal revenues in terms of operations, and we're going to be we're well within the 7% band there, which I think is good. Guideline 3A is the amount of utility surplus transfer in total versus total appropriations. So if we wanted to just really quickly go back to here, we're taking how much water surplus is being transferred, 500,000, how much electric surplus is being transferred, these three numbers here, and we're dividing that by total appropriations. So let's see numbers. So here's total appropriations, $3,570,000 just as, and 7.769 being transferred over. This guideline is a good guideline, but it's a little bit flawed, because if we had an excess, not flawed may not be the right word, I apologize to the committee for saying that, but it can get out of balance if we happen to have an excellent year in the utilities and there was an extra $1 million there, and you said, you know what, we want to pave more roads. We want to take that money, which has happened a lot in the history of Madison. If you look back at the audits, you'll see years where a large amount of utility surplus was transferred over to fund very large capital items. If we had that happen next year, you said, hey, Jim, extra $1 million in the utility revenue, we want to build the turf field, pave a road, do whatever it is that you want to do, that could be perceived by many people on council as being a good problem to have. That would make that guideline look worse. So just keep that in mind. And then the debt service to total appropriation, we're within that guideline. So those are kind of the major guideline reviews. The good news with this in 2017 and beyond is that the emergency note payment, which paid for the revaluation, will be going away. So that's an $80,000 less in expenses in 2017. The pilot payment from GVR will increase revenues. We're starting to anticipate that in the out years in line 2 of the projected budgets in 2017-18. We do anticipate construction permit and other related fees from GVR redevelopment to increase municipal surplus, which is why Pat pointed out, hey, Jim, you're anticipating $300,000 in capital for municipal surplus in those out years, because we're anticipating sewer connection fees and other increases in revenues that are not revenues that will stay at that level but will bump up for a number of years and then drop down, it makes sense to use those for capital. More electric and water customers at GDR. Council does have flexibility to increase beyond 2% if you wanted to, based on the tax levy, cap bank, and pension expenses. If you wanted to increase the tax more than that, call that good news or not. And 2017 beyond, we're still projecting maintaining all the services at current levels. Challenges are sewage processing costs, collective bargaining agreements coming due at the end of next year, the affordable housing litigation planning and implementation costs, which we've talked about. The Cadillac tax will come effective as it stands right now, January 2020. And costs for managing that and other mandates will just continue to increase. We had to actually purchase some additional modules in our payroll processing software company this year just to be able to track some of this information. And the water utility surplus, which I talked about earlier, we're going to be taking the level of the bathtubs going down. So those are some of the challenges in the out year.
Catch your breath for a second, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. You gave us sort of a qualitative feel for how much we could legally be eligible to raise via increases in property taxes. Can you give us a quantitative estimate?
It could be millions of dollars more. There's a significant amount
Billions.
of what's called cap bank in there. So and then the pension costs can be immediately absorbed
added
as a waiver of the tax levy. So it could be well over $1 million.
Okay, over $1 million. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm talking so fast, man. I'm trying to get
that's
done
hard.
so you guys can chat. So the alternative budget format is a different way of looking at the budget that was created by strategic planning. That part of the resolution and guideline says we should produce that so people can see. It shows the way, a little bit better understanding of how things are funded, both capital operations and shortfall and alike. And then finally, I just decided to do this on a whim. This is a similar chart to what was sent out in that mailer back in April, but I went out and actually picked a particular property in town that was about $688,000 valuation, which is about the middle of the road for a residential home in town. If its assessed value is $688,000, probably sell it for $750,000 to $780,000. And I looked at their actual tax bill for the last 3 years. We did this on a percentage basis in the mailer. I did this just in dollars, and was interesting to see that over the last 2 years, from 2013 to 2015, as I reported, the municipal budget, municipal portion of the tax bill dropped as a percentage. It actually dropped by $21 during that time. During that same time, the combined school and county portion of the tax bill increased by $613. So I said this multiple times in various meetings. I'm just going to repeat what Ben said last year, which is, if you're here concerned about property taxes, the council, I think, has done an excellent job over the last few years managing property taxes. And
Rob?
Thank you. So just one, maybe two quick questions. So as it pertains to the budget, what percent of the of our capital expenditures are you apportioning to utility surpluses and to revenue from other sources?
Okay, let's go back. So municipal budget, there's, sorry? Yeah, so $130,000 is coming from general capital fund balance, which is line 3.
Yeah.
And then of the $3.8 million, the other amount is coming from the electric surplus. So that's all.
So essentially 100% of it?
Yes.
And we have flexibility with caps, how we spend capital. We don't have much flexibility how we spend operating, so that's a good
And I think with our projections of the electric utility, we'll be in good shape for as Councilman Rowe pointed out, we'll be in good shape for the next few years in terms of the surplus that's generated from that.
What we can do right now is, and then we'll come back for the council to, give, as I always call every year, Jim his final marching orders between now and the introduction. But if there's anyone in the audience wishing to ask questions or comment on what you've just seen, you may come up, and this is only on the budget. In a few minutes, we will have open discussion on other items. Anyone in the audience wishing to comment or ask questions on the budget presentation, please step up to the lectern, state your name, your address, and usual guidelines, try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anyone wishing to comment or question? Yes, Missy?
Hi, Missy Elias, 40 Green Village Road. I was just thinking as I looked at the comments in the presentation about GVR and how that would potentially affect things going forward, that there's actually nothing, any place in the budget about affordable housing. And while we don't know what the outcome of the litigation is going to be, I just might think that there might be something taken into consideration someplace. I don't know, just a comment. Also, with respect to your very preliminary discussion about electric rate credits, several of you kind of interchangeably used the words ratepayers and taxpayers, and they're two different things. And there's also commercial and residential customers, so I'm not sure whether you're thinking about credits across the board or just residential. When Jim was talking about the average tax utility payment being $170, that makes me think residential, not commercial. So I don't know. It just sounded like there was a lot of apples and oranges involved in that discussion.
And it is apples and oranges and probably a fruit puree at this point. So I think the best thing we can do, what that second part of your question is, we'll make sure when it is on the agenda that we'll let you know, because I think it is premature to really have any discussion. It's new to most of the council members here, and it's kind of was one of those things floated out there and needs to be resolved. Related to the housing obligation, obviously the borough is already taking some steps, and that is revising our ordinances that calls for inclusionary housing, and then the other is we do have money sitting in the trust fund from developers, and so that will continue. So those would be the two main obligations. I think, as you've seen from this presentation, Borough of Madison is in good hands management-wise fiscally, and we're probably well ahead of the curve as far as approaching the affordable housing obligations that may come.
Yeah, and I know there are a lot of creative financing proposals that are associated with affordable housing.
Yep.
Just to me, the fact that it's just no place on the radar screen is, I don't know, I guess the word I'd use is odd. That's all. I don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I just think it's odd.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting, and we'll go to a final discussion on the budget. So as presented, are we comfortable with as we see it, and should Jim then go ahead and proceed to develop it that way?
Something real quick about what.
Yes, you may.
The only thing I want to add is that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would be the appropriate place to fund legal expenses and things like that. Because it's a trust fund, you don't see it in the municipal budget. So it's clearly something that's on our radar screen. But I don't think it's the intention of Fair Share Housing or anyone that is litigating on the other side for advocating for more affordable housing that taxpayers of a municipality have to start paying significant dollars in to actually build affordable housing. It's through zoning, through inclusionary zoning, and alike where they're expecting additional housing to be developed. So you see it on the, it's a concern, but you don't see it actually as a line item on there, so I just want.
Okay, so are we comfortable with as presented, and we'll introduce on March 14th? Or? Okay.
Yes and no. I mean, I think some of the things that came up tonight, unfortunately, it would have been better if we had a little further down the road, because I do care about the out years on the electric utility and understanding how the finances are going to change as a result of any credits is something I care about. I also am still concerned about the numbers, because I still think the numbers that are in here don't make sense compared to what our contracts are. You know, the other thing is, and it's probably heresy, but you know, this latest change actually takes us further away, because I did a quick comparison from where we were 2 or 3 weeks ago in terms of where the budget support is coming from. It's actually coming even less so from property taxes. I still think over time, someday, a council down the road is going to wonder why we put them in that position where such a small portion of what's a relatively stable funding source is not going to be available to them. We're relying more and more, and we're projecting the next couple of years it will be coming down, but on a very, I don't want to use the word risky, because we have managed the risk a bit, but over time, relying on the electric utility to fund so much of the borough operation is a risky proposition from my perspective.
I think I mentioned last time, Jim, but maybe as we get the introduction, if we can share with the council ahead of time, is projections. As I said, the GVR pilot, in essence, should be considered as property taxes. It's generated by property. So we should count that in there. And so if we can project what that percent split is when that, in the next couple of years, and then when it's full throttle, so to speak, it might be helpful, so we can see where we are trending, not just now, as the guideline has put it. You know, we're below the guideline in that area.
We do have it, Mayor, here in 2018. Conservative, we may be getting some GVR pilot payment in 2017, but to be conservative, I put it down there in 2018, and that's where we're actually seeing those types of revenues and the additional revenues coming from the surplus.
Right, and it's and the way we present it, it's going to skew the percent the wrong direction, because it's going to show up in other sources. Yeah. In reality, we should be counting it as, in this one calculation, as property taxes.
Jim, one other question, and that is on the health insurance. You're showing only a 1%, actually less than a 1% increase next year, and less than a 2% the following year. Is that realistic?
We've seen more and more employees opt out of health insurance and go with their spouse provider. And I think that alone, because of the increased contribution that they're giving, is reason enough to be to think that number's not going to increase that much, because so much we're actually having less employees that we need to cover. It's an estimate, and that could be one where the state comes in and says, yeah, that this year state health benefits is going to be going up 6 or 7%. At some point or another, when we get to that Cadillac tax, there's going to be a big hit between the level of benefits at the state health benefit plan and the cost versus what the Cadillac tax states. Sure, plenty of states, $15,000 or $18,000 a year for a family for health insurance is fine. The Cadillac tax doesn't take into account more expensive states like New Jersey, where health insurance is just more expensive. And so something's going to have to happen, whether it's state health benefits adjusting the level of benefits to keep costs down, or whether the Cadillac tax being adjusted kind of by a cost of living part of the country calculation.
I would suggest you take another look at the healthcare numbers, only because I think over the last several years we've probably seen people dropping out where the cost was going up dramatically for them because they were stepping into the full cost. I think now it's kind of leveled out, and I expect that the people who are in there are probably going to stay there unless they're given a better alternative. And in terms of the Cadillac health care tax, I thought I had seen that they were pushing that out several more years.
2020.
It is 2020 now, okay. It's going to get pushed out forever.
Jim, aren't our employees paying more towards their health insurance as well?
Yes.
I mean, that makes a difference also.
Yes. All employees are at the highest level except for the fire department. The fire department, I think, is the beginning in, yep. So we're, it's a valid point that Councilman Rowe is making, that number could be slightly higher, and we'll just have to see.
I think you've seen the last of anybody opting out because of the pain. If they're given an opportunity, they'll jump out. But I think at this point, everybody who's in probably needs the health care, and you'll see the full, and they've been raising them 6, 7, 8% a year the last several years anyway, haven't they? I mean, I think that's been the average cost. Now, we have not seen all that, but we will in the future.
Rob?
Thank you. So 3 things. First, I think you did a wonderful job, Jim. I think it's a very thorough analysis and well presented. Thank you. Secondly, as it pertains to the idea of rebates and electric, I'd love to hear it. My only experience, though, with things like that is, if I notice if I give my teenage son $100 to go out to dinner with his friend and their girlfriends, and I say, give me back whatever you have at the end of the night, I never get anything back. But if I give them $75 and I say, that's all you're going to get, they get the same amount of enjoyment. So, I'd rather have lower rates than the idea of a rebate. I really share Councilman Rowe's views on our overdependence, as I've said many times before, on the surpluses. And we have the numbers up there, but you can move it around. It's one sort of pot of money. If we lose the surplus, do we stop investing in capital? We will lose the surplus one day. It's a matter of time. So I really think, and at the end of last year's budget discussion, I asked that we look at a couple of operating expenses to see what, if any, savings or revenue generation we could get from that. I don't know if anything was done on that. It's too late to do it for this year, but it's something I hope that we spoke briefly about it, Jim. You can look at for next year. But I just it scares me to death because it reminds me a lot of what happened, I think, 10 years ago or so, where we had big surpluses. We had a shock. The surpluses went away. We had to jack up prices and cut service, so that's my concern. But I think it was a well thought out presentation, and thank you for it.
Ben?
Yes, thank you. This may come as a shock, but I actually agree with what you said.
No.
Yeah.
Let me take a picture. I'm not sure.
Okay, good.
I read your stuff. I'm not sure.
All right. This budget's fine. I mean, this is not a budget that will get us in trouble. But, there is an expression in markets about the trend is your friend. And the trend here is not going to be our friend forever. And I think in a period where we're doing quite well, which would appear to be the next 3 to 4 years, it gives us the flexibility to at least come up with contingencies if indeed we see a repeat of what had happened before. Because what happened before, when rates got away from us and we really were chasing the market, we ate through our surplus, we jeopardized the financial integrity of the budget, and we ended up with roads that needed enormous amounts of repair. That was not good planning. I mean, we learned from Sandy, there comes another storm, we'll be better prepared. You can't say when it's going to happen, but there is a certain inevitability in everything that it reverts to some mean. We're in a wonderful period right now. It's not going to be that way forever. And I think, and it's not part of the budget process, but I'd like to see us begin to talk about what do you do if. And that has 2 aspects to it. One is revenue raising, and certainly taxes are a key and important part of it. And the other side of it is curtailing expenses. And we talk about it, and I think we do a very good job in controlling expenses. I'm not so sure how good a job we've done in curtailing expenses. So that's something I hope to put time in the future. And obviously, it's a council effort. So I hope there's a sense on the council agreeing with my colleagues here, and we move ahead in the next year or so and going to be difficult. There are some big gorillas in the room when you get into these discussions, but it has to be addressed, in my view. Thank you.
Astri, and then Carmela.
Jim, I want to thank you too, and I also want to continue to thank the Strategic Budget Committee and their guidelines, because I really felt that it was very helpful, and the issue that you just alluded to, all of you, is one that I have right here. Is, can we sustain that? And so I'm glad to hear that we're all in agreement that we need to continue this discussion throughout the year. But it's a good budget, and I'm glad that we can present it to the people with all the services. So,
Carmela?
There's just one more
sorry.
thing.
Don't.
You're
interrupting him.
There is one more thing. I know we still have Prospect on the capital projects, and I was wondering, that's a big chunk of change, and are we actually going to be able to get to Prospect for today's? I mean, this year's.
Well,
that would change that number, that capital number.
it would. I mean, we did have a community meeting. We did commit to the residents that we were going to try to do that project this year. What we thought we would do is wait, see how the state budget position is in terms of state aid, in terms of the county aid projects. We have a pending application. If that was not successful, which is possible, and we were counting on 250 coming from the state, that we would defer the project to the following year and resubmit it, or split the request for the appropriation into 2 years, 2016 funding for half of it and 50% of the project in 2017. So as of right now, we won't know until August.
You want to keep it where it is.
I think it makes sense, but with the caveat, just as we did with Green Avenue, we slowed down with Green Avenue until we could get state funding. And obviously, if the state doesn't do anything related to putting money in the transportation fund, we will be coming back and having discussions that we're doing all this alone. And that would be a very big shame, as I've been saying many times.
Okay, thank you.
Carmela.
Okay, I'm just going to make a couple of comments. I've sat through many budget presentations on and off over the years, sitting at this table. And I have to say that the administration and Bob Landrigan and Ben Wolkowitz, this is spectacular. I don't think anybody out there sitting in the audience could not understand what was going on here. And I think it was very clear, so I truly appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that besides the numbers, we have to think of the human factor here. And this budget, as it is presented, is going to help to keep a lot of people here in Madison, and that's one of the things that we should all be concerned with. I'm also thrilled that we're going to finally talk about, a rate decrease, in the next couple of months. A lot of people sitting here know I'm a nudge. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to nudge it and make sure that we do have that conversation. But I'm truly appreciative that, this is a great budget. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the people actually giving us their input before we introduce it in March.
All right. Bob, do you have comments? And then I'll ask for a little action.
Well, started with me, so might as well end with me. Jim, I'm going to echo a lot of what everybody said here, and thank you and Ray and Ben for all the work you guys did on this. We met a lot of times, we spent a lot of hours on this. What I'll say is this, and Carmela, you stole some of what I was going to say, so I'll get you for that. These charts are good, and the Strategic Planning Committee provided a lot of good guidelines. But what Carmela said is true, and this is something I hold very true to the way I was elected to serve the residents, is what I'm going to say. Not to serve charts and not to serve graphs. And to the extent that the strategic planning guidelines provide guidelines that we can at least measure the budget by and explain why we may or maybe not adhering to them or maybe not sticking to the best absolute practices, that's great. Let's use those guidelines. But to the extent that we can look at this budget year by year while still looking out 5 years and really think what we can do to help the residents every year, keeping in mind that we all had a big revaluation last year. I think that's the job that, at least I was elected to do and others were elected to do. So this is a darn good budget. The impact on the municipal taxes is minimal. All our services are intact. There have been no layoffs. So I think this is a good budget that I'm very comfortable moving ahead with.
While you're on a roll here, so we can give Jim his official marching orders, if you could make a motion to ask the CFO to prepare the budget for introduction as proposed tonight, as presented tonight.
I'll make that motion that we move ahead and prepare the budget as presented tonight.
I'll second it.
Any further council discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Catalanello?
No.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
I'm going to vote yes on this, but it doesn't mean I'm going to approve the budget.
You're not tied for it yet. We got 2 more votes to go, so thank you very much. So, again, excellent job, Jim, and we'll be back with the introduction on March 14th. There are no ordinances for hearing, so we're now on to our second of invitations for discussion. This is when you may comment on anything. Please step up to the lectern, state your name, your address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Anyone wishing to comment, please step forward. Seeing none, I close this part of the meeting, and we now move on to introductory ordinances. Will the clerk please read the statement?
Okay, ordinance is scheduled for first reading. Have a hearing date set for Monday, March the 14th, 2016. All will be published in the Madison Eagle, posted on the bulletin board, and made available to members of the public requesting copies.
I call up the ordinances for first reading and ask the Borough Clerk to read said ordinances by title.
Ordinance 8, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $125,000 from the Municipal Open Space Trust Fund for restoration and repair of the James Library Building.
Mayor, I move Ordinance 8-2016.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion on this ordinance? Rob?
Yes. I'm glad that we have learned that there is no plan for private fundraising, finally. Unfortunately, as late as last year, we were told there was a plan, and when the initial presentation was made, it was in I forget the director's name at the time.
Yep.
Right. So that's changed. Furthermore, I'm very concerned about the sort of open-endedness of this, particularly as it pertains to that roof. I really think we need to stop this hodgepodge sort of, we give $125,000 a year. We hope to get a 4-to-1 return, in the county. Sometimes it's 2.8 to 1, sometimes it's 3 to 1. And I think we need to get an actual estimate, because if I recall in the initial presentation, there was a better sort of total cost estimate. Now that's sort of not the case anymore, and you need to bond for it. Because I'm telling you, when I replaced the roof on 7 Dogwood Drive, there's a little, Pennsylvania gray slate roof, and it was expensive. I can just imagine what that's going to cost. And I think we need to know what we're spending, and then we borrow it. And I still think there should be some sort of fundraising around it.
Yep.
But I mean, I really, because, I think the roof's going to cost more than a couple $100,000. It just, and I'm not a builder, I don't know anything about it, but I've replaced slate roofs before.
Yep.
And paid for it out of my own pocket.
And just to echo your, I think we should have a conversation. Obviously, the museum has been a great steward of the James Library, and but the conversations over the last few years have been around some private fundraising, and if not them, we need to find some group that will take on being friends of the James Library and working to help support that great building.
So 2 things. One, I was a little surprised to learn that we're now in a 6-phase project. I thought we were in the last half of the project at this point. Now we're not even halfway done. The second thing is I thought we did have an agreement with the library in the last year that they were going to commit to doing some level of fundraising so that it would lessen the burden on taxpayer funds.
Fundraising.
But they just said they're not going to do any fundraising for this project.
In the lease, it's in the James It's to the James Building Fund.
But I thought
That's
the
what we
agreement was
agreed.
they would do fundraising towards capital.
That was in the original presentation.
Yeah.
No, but I think I thought in the last
Even
year.
last year, I recall. Yeah, I definitely recall.
Ostry?
Director James isn't here anymore. She did opine that there was this consultant that was supposed to arrange for the museum to have a fundraising capacity. And I don't think that has happened. And maybe
We were told tonight it wasn't. We were told tonight there was going to be no fundraising.
That was the first year, yes.
But no, just tonight we were told. I mean,
So there's no, yeah.
we just have to know what this is going to cost, and then we need to bond for it.
It's
We need to pay. We need to pay for it, because otherwise it's just going to keep going and going
Sure,
and
we
going.
need the bond for it, but, 4 years ago, there was a presentation made about what the phases were and what they were going to cost. And until tonight, I thought that's what the plan was, and now it's not the plan. So I'd like to now see what the new plan is and have maybe Bob Vogel vet their numbers at a minimum.
So if we can put on the future agenda a report back on, with the engineer's assistance and some better numbers as a projection, and again, some conversation. You can do annual fundraising at the same time of doing capital fundraising. It's not the easiest thing to do, but as I said, I think it can be done.
The way they're funding this project is similar to the way we're going to try to fund the Hartley Dodge Memorial Plaza.
Yeah,
I
that's.
mean, exactly the same way. We're going to take some money from open space and leverage the county dollars and hope that we get enough to do the whole project, or else it's going to be done in stages, just like this is.
I think if we have if we have an idea of the full implications of all the building improvements just to maintain the building, and maybe even the museum may have some ideas as far as what they might need capital-wise for exhibits and all that, which would be separate from what normally would be, and maybe there is an appetite for some sort of capital campaign, but we need to know that. Bob had hand up and then back to Rob.
Yeah, I guess this is why I asked the question before. Are they restricted in terms of how much money they can get per year, and that would limit the scope of their project on an annual basis? I mean, the county, from what I'm understanding, and correct me if I heard wrong, limits how much money they can get per year, and hence that limits how much work they can do per year.
Right. I mean, it's probably time to revisit and have an entire presentation before the council, because it has changed slightly because the expenses were more and they had to spread things out over a longer period of time because
I think that's appropriate. Maybe
happened.
another presentation would be a good
the roof,
idea.
I think, over the 2 years is definitely a new concept because of the cost.
All right, so we'll get that as a future presentation. Rob, did you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, when we're going to do the plaza, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what the total cost is going to be before we march into it. And all I'm asking for is what's the total cost going to be, and then let's march into it with everybody knowing what it is, and and I understand there's limitations on how much you can get from the county, but that doesn't mean we can't borrow. And maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me if I am. We can borrow it all up front and say, oh, here's our money for this year, here's our money for next year, here's our money for the year after that. But at least this way we know what it's going to cost us.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Catalanello?
No.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
No.
Ordinance 9, 2016, ordinance of the Borough of Madison appropriating $35,000 from the General Capital Improvement Fund for replacement of the air conditioning system in the Public Safety Complex servers room.
Mayor, I move Ordinance 9-2016.
I second.
Council discussion?
I got a couple questions. You go first, Ben. I think we're going to ask the same thing. It's pretty obvious, right?
All right, so this is a relatively new building.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So what's going on with the air conditioner?
In the server room. It's
A typical life of HVAC, especially compressor-wise, is 5 years. A compressor can go in 5 years. Whether replacing the whole unit is usually not normal at this point. I'm not too sure. I know it sounds like this unit did not have an economizer. I don't know whether the new one would, which would mean an economizer this time of year could take outside air to cool. We know that the current unit doesn't. So
That's correct.
So would the new unit?
It would. I mean, basically, the server room at Public Safety is the ground zero or the data control center for all electronics in the borough. All our email, 911, emergency response, everything. And twice last week, the temperature in the room got over 97 degrees and shut off the email for the entire borough. So the system failed and went down twice within a 1 week period. Fire chief raised it and elevated the issue, said this is an emergency. We're going to lose 911. We're going to use everything. Our phone system, the works. The building was designed without the economizer or the outside air being introduced into the space by the architect. So the chief is recommending that on an emergent basis we do this, otherwise we're going to lose our communication system, and that's the purpose.
I have no objection to doing it. My only concern is that that's an air conditioner in an air-conditioned building.
Right.
So what do we think about the rest of the air conditioners?
So the rest of the building is fine, but this runs 24/7, and the equipment, I'll defer to Pat, it generates a tremendous amount of heat, the electronics within the building, within that room.
All right, so it's a
unique conditioning system. I don't know if Pat has better expertise in.
Or Bob, and then over to Pat.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can opine a bit on this. I used to be in the facilities department at J.P. Morgan. A server room air conditioner, like Ray said, it runs 24/7, and it's a very hot environment. Why they didn't design it better, I don't know. But the reality of it is, in this situation, it will fail after a couple of years, and it does need to be replaced because it is a critical system. Maybe as part of this project, they could see if there's a better design for it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but regardless, this needs to be done now.
The bigger problem is, I think you said it's an air conditioner. In an environment like this, there should be some, is there redundancy? So we're losing one of the two units? Or?
It's a split system. It's a two-unit system, split system, but the other part of this is going to be a redo of the ductwork system to introduce what the mayor is talking about, to lessen the load and the stress on the equipment by introducing outside air into the space. So that's part of this also.
That only is going to help in the wintertime. In the summertime, that's not going to do anything.
No, but it will help.
So, I mean, now you'd get some benefit, but when it's 90 degrees in the summertime, it's going to not help. I'm surprised it actually failed this quickly. I would have thought it would have lasted a little bit longer. And, but, we don't really have a choice because those systems have to work.
Well, we're 8 years in. The building's
It's 8 years in, and that's not
8 years old.
Useful life on one of those in that situation is maybe 10 to 12 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I've worked in data centers. I've never seen stuff replaced that fast.
Yeah, I've replaced a few compressors in less that time, but never a full unit. Yeah. All right, any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
Consent agenda resolutions. Will the clerk please read the statement?
Consent agenda resolutions will be enacted with a single motion. Any resolution requiring expenditure is supported by a certification of availability of funds. Any resolution requiring discussion will be removed from the consent agenda. All resolutions will be reflected in full in the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I move resolutions 83-2016 through resolution 93-2016.
I second.
Any discussion, or do any need to be pulled? Roll call vote.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes.
There is no unfinished business. Approval of vouchers.
Okay. Public safety, $28,950.79. Health and public assistance, $1,639.53. Public Works and Engineering, $168,571.45. Community Affairs, $1,184.85. Finance and Borough Clerk, $5,829,837.82. And Utilities, $50,077.05. The total, $6,080,261.49.
Mayor, I move the vouchers.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Mr. Catalanello?
Yes.
Mr. Landrigan?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitale?
Yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Wolkowitz?
Yes.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes. And with that, I move we adjourn.
Amen, brother. Thank you, Mr.
Bob, I will not be at the next meeting. I will be in London.
Okay.
It's the 12th, right?
14th.
14th.
Down, down.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Always ahead of me.
Yeah, 12th is Saturday.
Well, yep.
It was interesting.
Are you around for the joint meeting next?